Well, how we doing tonight? It's been a little while. I'm back from my whirlwind trip abroad with the Notre Dame women's basketball team to Paris, along with Jesse Stiers, Sean Stiers. It's mailbag night. Back to answer some questions. I haven't been able to talk any Notre Dame football for a while, so I'm ready to go. I'm
That
ready to go
changes tonight, baby. Let's go.
yeah. Jesse breaking out the microphone. It's man, I tell you what, yesterday, the trip home yesterday, we got up at 6 a.m. Paris time, which is midnight in the East Coast, New York Eastern time zone here in New York, and didn't get to bed for like over 20 hours by the time it was all said and done. But the bus to the airport, the flight home, the whole thing, and I still woke up way earlier than I wanted to this morning. They told us don't sleep on the way home, stay awake, and to avoid the jet lag and all that kind of stuff. I still woke up before like 5:30 this morning. So it's I guess there's just no way to avoid at least some kind of short-term jet lag.
Yeah, that's why I was surprised. You texted me this morning. You're like, "We're doing the show, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, if you're there, I'm there." I thought, if anything, I was definitely going to be here, and I didn't know if you would be quite back yet. So it
Yeah.
sounds like everyone's
Salty says
appreciative.
Yeah, Salty says they lied. They said you weren't back until Thursday. Now I'm glad I put you on the clock. And this is what happens when you listen to Vince. See,
Uh-oh.
because I was listening to your show on Monday, and he was saying Thursday, and so I texted him because it was at some point during my trip home yesterday. I was listening to you guys just to kind of hear your takes on the Clemson game and the whole thing. I got to watch a little bit of the Clemson game on my phone in my room, and they had like smart TVs and all that different kind of stuff, and I thought I was going to be able to, because there's an option on the remote, connect your smart device to your smartphone. Well, for whatever reason, it wouldn't work if you were using it, the hotel Wi-Fi. One, it wouldn't stream the game at all, and then two, you had to have the hotel Wi-Fi on to connect your device, but it wasn't working. So long story short, I had to just watch it on my phone, what I could. So you guys, everybody else got to watch it on a real screen, and I got to watch it on my phone that night. We had French TV obviously was the standard. There were 4 English speaking channels on the TV. 2 were BBC, 2 were some other thing. So I watched a lot of like English Big Brother, type stuff. Got, seeing people getting voted off. I watched the Truman Show one night, all in French. It's like, oh, I can kind of tell what's going on. It's the Truman Show, like Jim Carrey. And then otherwise, Sunday, they did have 3 NFL games on an Austrian. There were a few German/Austrian channels that they carried, and they had Austrian/German announcers doing NFL games. So I got to watch Ravens Seahawks in German. I got to watch Giants Raiders. Ugh. That's the one that finally put me to sleep. Apparently, they had the Chiefs Dolphins game on earlier in the day as well, but we were out of the hotel at that point, so
Ryan Roberts is a
did
funny
not get to see
guy.
that. What did Ryan say? Where's Ryan? Where's
The
Ryan?
very bottom, he said,
Oh, did the Cowboys win this? Thanks, Ryan. Yes, thank you.
Did
They
you
did
even get to
not.
see any of that game? Did you record? Have you watched any of that game so far?
I just could not care less. They lost. I don't care. It's
It was actually a really good game, even though they lost. It was.
I'm not doing a Cowboys podcast. There's no reason for me to go back and watch that. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, it was a close game. But what did I tell you? What did I tell you going in? They don't beat the good teams. So
It was on the road. A lot of good performances. I think if it's
yeah.
in Dallas, they'll win.
I met an IB listener, by the way, at the hotel in Paris on the elevator one day. I forgot to get her name. It was an Irish women's basketball fan who was there and said that she listened to the show. So if you're listening/watching, hello. It was nice to meet you. I forgot to get your name before we walked away. We were like on the way down to the lobby, heading out, that kind of thing. So if you want, you can throw in some women's basketball questions. You can throw in some men's basketball questions, and of course, you can throw in some Notre Dame football questions. Whatever you want to talk about. It's mailbag night. Just we might have to block Ryan here if he's not careful. The way things are turning out right now. We had a lot of fun in Paris, though. It was a lot of fun with the exception of Monday night, the outcome of the game. But some of that will come up a little bit. DK says, I hear Paris is a romantic city. Will Jesse be getting his brother Jacques around August? Come on now, Derek.
This is a PG show, not even PG-13.
Right. That's right. Jesse and Jacques. And then I think it was Irish Gordian Knot was just slamming Paris and the overrated nature of the romance and all that kind of stuff. Look, it was a good time. I was very good. We hit the Louvre, we hit the Eiffel Tower, we hit the Arc de Triomphe, Champs-Élysées. We did one of these. It was like an on-off bus tour. If you ever go, like to Paris, or I hear London does the same kind of thing with some of these bigger cities, those bus tour kind of things, they're worth the price. You can get like a 24, 48, or 72-hour pass, and they take you, on a loop of all the sites that you need to see, and then you can get off the bus, go, tootle around at the site. Then the next time the bus comes back, they have multiple buses going. You jump back on the bus and you go to the next thing, and you just kind of keep hitting the loop. It was well worth it. The Arc de Triomphe was cool, by the way. It took them. Do you know what the Arc de Triomphe is? Any idea?
Nope.
Like, have you seen it? You saw it?
Nope.
Saw my picture on social media. I know you're not on it, but your girlfriend is. Napoleon built this thing at the end of the Champs-Élysées as basically as a memorial to him, because Napoleon built memorials for like everything that he did. Every battle that he won, Napoleon was out there making sure everyone remembered it. So he built this thing called the Arc de Triomphe. Huge arc. They finished the Tour de France at the Arc de Triomphe. Like, if you ever see, that where they're coming down the Champs-Élysées and, they lead up to the Arc. Took them 30 years to build that thing. And you can go up in it. There's like a roundabout, that circles the Arc de Triomphe, and you actually go under the street there. You go down some stairs, and then you come back up, you get in line, and then you have to climb the stairs. There's no elevator to the top of the Arc, but there are restrooms at the top of the Arc, which is cool as well. But you go up there, and then you can, look around. A lot of different cool views from the top of the Arc. So highly recommend it. Let's get into some questions other than DK's question. I'll throw them up there. Jesse will throw them our way. Let's start with Domer girls.
Ooh, this is a nice question. Mailbag. Happy midweek mailbag. Welcome back, Sean. What would you like to see as the ideal front seven on defense next year? Then who's the nickel rover that subs in depending on your base defense?
Man. Okay. Let me start with the nickel rover. As of right now, we're assuming that, we're just going we don't know what's going to happen with the transfer portal, because obviously they went to the transfer portal to get Thomas Harper last year, right? So as of right now, I'll put Jaden Mickey in there, because we're talking about front seven. But I'll put Jaden Mickey in the nickel, and then you'll have Benjamin Morrison and Christian Gray as the two outside cornerbacks. So starting with that, What do you think about that to start off with?
Yeah, I think that's a logical starting place because I think Morrison's going to be in his spot. And I think Mickey, obviously, in his small sample size this year, did well. And he is kind of the next guy, I think, to be one of your outside corners. So it's like, to me, he kind of looks like a Benjamin Morrison 2.0. And I think he's definitely got the talent to do it as well. So I agree with how you have this started.
Yeah. So that's assuming no transfers, all that kind of stuff. Like Antonio Carter, we haven't seen as much of him as I probably thought we would this year, so I don't know if maybe he could be in play there next year. Now, in terms of the front seven, it gets a little bit more difficult. One, because we don't know who all is coming back with eligibility and all that kind of stuff. Let's assume, do we want to assume Riley Mills will probably head to the NFL? Your thoughts on that to start off with?
No, I think Mills would come back for a season.
You think he would come back for
yeah,
another season?
I think he'd come back for one more.
To try to elevate his draft stock even more? Because I think right now he's probably still a day 3 guy with a lot of day 1 to day 2 potential upside. Okay, I can live with that. So let's assume. Okay, so Riley Mills is coming back. So 3 technique. You've got Mills. You've got Jason Onye. If Mills does leave, I think that you've got Onye there.
And Heinisch.
And Heinisch. Nose guard Howard Cross.
He's gone. So I think you have Gabriel Rubio. Yeah, but I don't know who's going to be the 2 after that.
Exactly. What the depth looks like after that. And Rubio, I think, will be ready, and I think you would expect he would pack on even a little bit more muscle, that whole thing. Jordan Botello, I think, will be back. So I would pencil him in at the Viper.
Yes.
The other side,
I think it's going to be Burnham. I'm just going to say it.
That's kind of what I think. That's kind of how I'm leaning as well.
I think he showed really good flashes this season.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's not like starter type guy this season, but in the action he's got, he hasn't been a liability. I think he's done more good things than he's done bad things. And I think when you have, Baptiste in front of him and Usafa Mensah in front of him, both guys who I believe are going to be out of eligibility next year, I think he naturally comes in. I don't know if Mensah has one year left. I don't think he does, though.
I don't think so either, but I think it would be Burnham, and then you'll have some other options, behind him in terms of younger guys. Now,
so now comes the hard part.
Yeah, I mean, where it really gets complicated is with the linebackers, because they're all in their 5th year, but they all also have more eligibility left. And I think everyone's head would explode if all 3 of these guys come back for another year. Just with, and like Al Golden was saying good stuff a couple of weeks ago about Drake Bowen, but like he loves JD Bertrand as well, and he's got a veteran there. So the ideal, like I think that you probably got Drake Bowen at middle linebacker, maybe Jaden Osbury as the will linebacker, and Jalen Sneed playing rover. Like, I'm just
my thing is
definitely the one that everyone wants to see. I have no idea how they're going to approach the eligibility of these guys, the extra eligibility that they've got.
I think you'll see. I think Maris Liufau. Here's how I think it goes. I think you have Bertrand will be back. And then I think you'll see Osbury and Bowen
kind of splitting
rover and will linebacker duties. But I think it's tough because Drake Bowen's not really a rover, but he's not really the weak side linebacker either. He's really just a middle linebacker in my opinion, but I think Bertrand will be back. So I think your starters are going to be Bertrand, Osbury, and probably Snead at the end of the day.
Yeah. I'll be curious to see if they decide to tweak this defense, because, part of the question was assuming they keep this defense. And obviously we have no idea what's going to happen with Al Golden in terms of, if he's going to move on, whether it's a college head coaching job, defensive coordinator job, all that stuff really is going to start to get hot and heavy here in a couple of weeks. Once the season ends,
Yeah.
there's going to be all kinds of movement around the country in terms of, coaches, moving on and all that kind of stuff. So we'll find out pretty quickly, but for right now, I don't know, but I am curious because we've seen less and less of the Rover the last couple of years, just because of how you have to play defense in college football now. So
I think Kaiser ultimately is gone one way or the other, because I think, like you said, he in that Rover position, he's kind of been phased out because they don't use the true Rover a lot. And then when they get in those passing downs, you're just substituting, a defensive back in there. And so I just think with where Kaiser's at in his career and knowing kind of the young, talent that's pushing behind him, I think he's going to make a decision one way or the other. And I don't think it's going to involve being back at Notre Dame next season.
Yeah. Next question from Joe.
Mailbag. If Golden leaves, who would you like to see as the next defensive coordinator?
So here's the problem that I've got with this. And it's the same problem. We've talked about this a couple of different times this year. Marcus Freeman has said Mike Mickens is ready to go. And I've always thought, based on the job that Mike Mickens has done, both as a recruiter, talent evaluator, developer of cornerbacks, that he makes sense. But look at the issues that you have on offense with an inexperienced
first-time coordinator.
Yeah. And as I've said all along, what works against Mike Mickens is the fact that you would have a third-year head coach still cutting his teeth. Look at the issues that you've had with a first-time full-time offensive coordinator with Jared Parker. I just don't. As much
big
as
roll of the dice.
Yeah, as much as I think Mike Mickens would be great, a great defensive coordinator, only Marcus Freeman, I think, truly knows just how fully ready he is to go. And if he wants to go down that road again with more inexperience, because that is just a lot of inexperience across the board.
Well, put it like this:
with a first-time defensive coordinator with what you've already got with the other positions.
Big picture. Does Marcus Freeman really roll? So there's already all the talk about Parker, right? So decisions got to be made about whether or not you're rolling Parker into a season 2 or you're doing something else to, divvy up those duties, right? So that's already a hot topic. Say Golden leaves, and now you roll into, like you were saying, a first-time defensive coordinator, and Marcus Freeman is going into year 3, which is honestly going to be the most crucial year, because the expectations just get higher and higher after you add a season of being a head coach at Notre Dame, right? And so are you really going to take the risk with a first-time defensive coordinator and a offensive coordinator that's under fire in year 3 when it's probably your most prove-it kind of statement year as a head coach, and a year where you can really but grab or solidify the fans' trust in you as a head coach?
Yeah, exactly. Here's one thing I will guarantee you. It will not be Alex Grinch. Yes, that is the only thing I'm willing to go out on a limb on. It will not be Alex Grinch. He will not be Notre Dame's next coordinator.
But say it is Mickens, though. Does Freeman, like some people in the chat are saying, kind of hold his hand along the way, kind of show him the blueprint of what it is to be a defensive coordinator? Because he's been he's been with Marcus Freeman for a long time. So I'd have to believe that he'd adapt or have a similar system to what he's learned through Marcus Freeman over, X amount of years.
Right. I mean, you do have a defensive-minded head coach, so it would not be out of the question that Marcus Freeman could play, kind of a big hand. And Mickens was Freeman's cornerbacks coach twice, both at Cincinnati and here at Notre Dame. So he's had a pretty big hand in that defense before. And so it would, again, it would be a pretty natural fit, and you would have Marcus Freeman there, to kind of help guide things, I guess. But you would still have on game day, unless Marcus Freeman is leaning more into calling the shots, you would still have an inexperienced coordinator calling the shots on game day. So it's not just the game plan. You still have to think about who's making calls on Saturdays as well. All right, here's one from Terry, and we'll just address this one really quickly.
Has anyone heard any more on the offensive changes that Notre Dame is making?
Yeah, so look, this is one of those things that came up from basically a Twitter account, an anonymous Twitter account. This guy does not put his name on his Twitter account. Should I just say the name of the account?
It's that college
football watcher. And he's obviously a big Notre Dame fan, and he claims to hear things. From what I understand, he goes on the different message boards and he sees some of the things posted, and then he makes the post without one attributing where he got the information from to begin with, acting like he's actually heard something and it is his own information. And so when you do that kind of stuff, this is what happens. Rumors. It all just becomes one big rumor, and everyone puts more credence into it than it deserves. And from everything that I have heard, I know everything that Brian has heard, there's no reason to believe any of this. If you're a member of the Champions Lounge, the Irish Breakdown Premium Board, Brian has posted some new intel regarding, the offensive staff. And there's no reason to believe that, and I don't think there should be any reason to believe, and I don't think that there should be any changes, but there's no reason to believe any changes are going to be made, long and the short of it. That's it. Especially with 2 games to go in the season and a bowl game. And then following up on that.
Is Parker calling plays versus Wake Forest? Please tell me no.
Again, based on everything that we're hearing, I don't think that there's any reason to believe that there are going to be changes made inside the season.
I just don't think, as much as there's frustration with what's going on, and in the moment it's your immediate, trigger is let's fire him. It's not a realistic look, and it's not a good look for a program to let go of an OC with 2 games left in their first stint as an offensive coordinator, right?
Yeah.
And so I think if anything is going to happen, it's going to be after the season is over and they can, officially sit down and kind of have it's like, when you had when you were a kid growing up, you had parent teacher conference meetings at the end of, the semesters or the school years or whatever it is. That's what it's like. You wait until the end, and you're going to have those sit downs with players, coaches. Everyone has a conversation with the head coach, and that's when it will take place. And that's just who Marcus Freeman is as a coach and who Notre Dame is as a program, I believe. I don't think neither of them or neither of those entities are going to hang out their offensive coordinator to dry with 2 games left in the season.
Correct. So Tim B asked this one.
Do you think that the offensive struggles are particular to Parker, or is there a different issue like a structural problem? So what I would say to this, or what this question is posing, is the blame Jared Parker? Is the blame Sam Hartman? Or is the blame from the very top of how the overall offense is to kind of be run? Is that how you would interpret that question?
I do. That's basically my interpretation. And I think that there is plenty, unfortunately, of blame to go around on this. I do think play calling is part of it. You've broken down the predictability of, formations, personnel, play calling, all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, there are open you can point to wide receivers. Are the receivers getting separation? Well, in all cases, no, but in some cases, yes. And it's incumbent upon the 6th-year quarterback to see the open receiver. He doesn't seem like he's making his reads the way that he needs to be making his reads. And again, it's like, who is that on? Well, some of it's on the coach, but some of it is also on the sixth-year quarterback who's been through this stuff before. He's got to see it better, plain and simple. But then at the same time, you go like, okay, is there more to the offensive philosophy of the current offensive coordinator, Jared Parker? Would he like to be doing some things that maybe he's not allowed to do because the head coach, who's a defensive-minded head coach, wants it done a certain way? There does definitely seem to be some of that going on. But at the same time, I look at the second half of the Clemson game, and after Audric Estime had such a big first half, if it's your defensive or if it's your head coach who is a former defensive coordinator who's got his thumbprint all over things and he's tipping the scale and how he wants things run, why didn't your power running back, who's been, been considered one of the best running backs in the country and maybe the best running back eligible for the NFL draft next year, why did he only run the ball 3 times in a game that was a one-possession game for a majority of the second half on Saturday? If that's what the head coach wants, and he is allegedly tipping the scales so hard, why did Audric Estime only have the ball in his hands 3 times in the second half? These are all it just makes things that much more confusing in trying to figure out exactly where we should assess the majority of the blame. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the best way to refer to this is an offensive cocktail that is, some parts Jared Parker, some parts Sam Hartman, some parts Joe Rudolph and the offensive line not being as good as it usually is. I think that you get a little bit of, maybe Marcus Freeman in there a little bit. How you want to divvy that up between those 4 is up to you. Maybe you feel that there's 0 for some people. Maybe you feel like it's all some people. I think that it is. So let me put it like this. Sam Hartman missed throws 100%. Upon further review, Vince and Brian did a good job of pointing out areas where Sam Hartman just simply didn't make the right throws. Okay, that happens. I get that. But let's look at the fact again that on a lot of Sam Hartman's dropbacks, I think on of his dropbacks, he was under pressure like 65% of the time. That has to go into that as well, right? Like it's easy to sit back and watch film and say he needs to make this read or that read, but this is happening in split seconds with a very good defense in your face.
And that happens to every quarterback in every game as well. Like, let's not act like this only happens at Notre Dame. Like, only Notre Dame quarterbacks are not seeing an open receiver and not throwing to him or not throwing at the exact, like, it happens all the time. Things are more structurally broken with this offense than just the quarterback not, seeing an open receiver and not throwing to him on time. It is much more than that right now.
Yeah, and then I would say the bigger part to me is you have an offensive coordinator that gets in very predictable sets, and I think that handcuffs what you can do as a quarterback, because when a defense has an inkling or an idea of where you're trying to get to on the field, or what the tendency might be, because you're running 90% of the time in this look, it's either run or pass. I don't think that helps your quarterback. I think that handcuffs what he can do. I think that handcuffs pre-snap what he's looking at, and I just think it overall adds to probably a lot that's going through Sam Hartman's mind pre-snap and making his play obviously not as ideal as it should be. And so, again, that is part of – everyone's got a contribution to the cocktail. I feel personally that Jared Parker is not calling the right plays in the right situation, and he comes out and I'm not kidding you. I can literally probably watch most plays and tell you it's going to be run or pass. And I don't feel like that is a good thing for an offense that's struggling to move the ball. And then you get into second and third, 6, 7, 8 type ranges. And again, if you're in a predictable formation, it's very hard to pick up 6 or 7 yards on those predictable downs. And so that's where I'm at. I just feel, me personally, I lean more to Sam Hartman being handcuffed by, the play calling and how predictable it is pre-snap what's going to happen.
I think it has more to do with that as well. When you look at how boxes are stacked against different formations, different looks, the kind of plays. And again, I know the offensive line has also had its struggles, but that still doesn't answer why you're only handing Audric Estime the ball 3 times in the second half after he rushed for nearly 100 yards in the first half. None of that answers that question. Again, in what was a one possession game, and they had chance after chance after chance. You didn't have to just keep throwing the ball. How Audric Estime only touches the ball 3 times is just, it's beyond me. And Tim says, where's the self-scouting at Notre Dame on offense? And see, this goes like self-scouting it's been something that's been asked of Marcus Freeman over the last 3 weeks, coming out of the first bye week, asked about self-scouting. And he said it was not about self-scouting. He said it was about what, Jesse?
Execution. Winning the interval.
You're supposed to do the Jonah Hill. When I point at you, you're supposed to say, do you want me to talk here? And I'm supposed to say, yes, when I point at you.
Well, now I know.
Execution. And again, I think execution is a part of the deal. I think the majority of this goes to the predictability of the plays that are being called. And, again, go back a few weeks. Marcus Freeman asked if Sam Hartman has the autonomy to audible at the line of scrimmage. And Marcus Freeman basically said, well, he kind of does. But at the same time, if there's something that we want run, he's got to run it. So you're not really saying that he's got the autonomy to change plays at the line of scrimmage, if that's the case. So I just think that, again, I think that there are pieces of everything that come into play. And we all know, does it pass the eyeball test? It doesn't even come close to passing the eyeball test. You know what a functional looking offense looks like. And this ain't it. That's just the bottom line.
And
so, and if the quarterback is playing the way that he plays, then it falls some on him, but it also falls on coaching to figure out how to get the best out of him. And if you're just going to keep doing the same thing again and again and again and expect a different result, you're just sadly mistaken, because that's what they've continued to do. And the offense has not looked any better ever since the end of Ohio State and coming out of Ohio State for what is that? The last 5 games now, it has looked like a broken offense. And that is exactly what it has been. It is a broken offense for a lot of different reasons. The quarterback, the offensive coordinator, the head coach, and the quarterback's coach, the offensive line, the wide receivers, everyone's culpable in this.
Yeah.
There's no one without any blame.
I think what the underlying statement is that the offense is a hot mess, and it's really sad because the defense is a championship level defense, and the offense, everyone knew that the offense would go, that this team would go as far as the offense took them this season, and everyone on the offensive side of the ball hasn't lived up to that expectation. They haven't answered the call for the rest of where the rest of the team is at, defensively, special teams, and etc. And like you were saying, I mean, Sam Hartman had a PFF grade in 2021 of 91.8. In 2022, he had a PFF grade of 88.4. Right now, in 2003, he has a 72.7 PFF grade. And so you're telling me that he is supposedly going to better talent, offensive line, running back, wide receiver talent at Notre Dame, but for some reason his game has gotten worse with, a supposed better coaching, a better scheme, all of that. And so how can you see that big of a drop-off in a player that when you're supposedly adding better resources around him?
And you can't tell me that he had better wide receivers at Wake Forest. If you want to point the finger at wide receivers and the wide receiver coach and say that they're to blame for all that, you can't tell me that he had better wide receivers at Wake Forest. I'm sorry. They were all 2- and 3-star guys for the most part as well. And none of them are, like NFL stars by any means. None of them are high round draft picks in the NFL. I wanted to where did Josh? Basically, Josh was saying that the offense looked good against Pitt. Did it really? Did it really look good against Pitt? They averaged 4.7 yards per carry against Pittsburgh. That is below average in college football. They still scored a lot of points against Pittsburgh because the defense and special teams contributed. I know they scored a lot of points, and at the end of the day, the stats say that they racked up all this yardage, over 500 yards against Pitt. Did it really look that great against Pittsburgh, though? Do you think it did,
No.
Jess?
I was at the game, and I would say no. And, it just never felt like the offense manufactured a full drive of points on their own. They were always aided by different aspects, maybe the defense, maybe the special teams. And, and that's the other thing. And Jelly had one of those drives towards the end. Like when you start subtracting out, some of these points and yardage provided by other aspects other than the starting offense, I don't think their performance was that great.
I concur. Aiden, thank you for the super chat. Aiden, up to this point, who have you heard or who do you guys think has taken the biggest strides, improvements this season? Fall camp to now. I'll just go two. I'll go Xavier Watts. If you look at where Xavier Watts was, that's still, off the charts right there. I put Faison in there. Even though Faison had a good
you
camp,
took Faison from me.
Sorry.
That's where I was going to go offensively.
Those are my two biggest. I think you can probably put Christian Gray and Jaden Mickey in there. Both of them were solid around fall camp, but both of them, what they showed that they could do in that Pittsburgh game, stepping up with both Morrison and Hart out the majority of the time, I think really speaks to their development. Again, it's really a big big pat on the back for Mike Mickens as well.
I would say I really like Rocco Spindler's strides and improvements as well, because I think he's been a reliable offensive guard. I think at the beginning of the season there were still questions, and I feel like now he's that guy where I don't really have questions about his game, to be honest with you. And then I was going to go Faison at wide receiver. I was going to go Watts, obviously, at the safety position. And then, I would say Cam Hart as well, because Cam Hart still had a lot of question marks going into the season. And I think he showed improvement and stride of being that consistent guy and staying healthy as well throughout the season. So those are my group of guys.
Baptiste is a good one. Tim B says Baptiste.
Baptiste is actually,
Baptiste. Really, since the Ohio State game, that was kind of a launching off point for him. His game has really come along since then. That's a good one, Tim. Go ahead, Jess.
It really is too, because at Ohio State, he was more of like a nickel dime pass rusher. And at Notre Dame, he's become a true defensive. He plays the run really, really well. Really, really well. He is, in a lot of these games, him and Howard Cross have dominated in the run game. And I don't think that's a skill set that we thought was in his toolbox at the beginning of the season.
Yes.
Brian Wired is just all capitals.
Stop yelling at us. Stop yelling at us, Brian. With his all caps on.
You could make a case for probably everyone on defense, to be honest with you. At the end, there's some aspect of their game. Well, I everyone would say everyone but Maris, but I don't want to get into that conversation.
Look, man, I heard what you guys were saying about Maris on Monday, and I agree. As a coverage guy,
fantastic,
and pressure rushing, he does great. But in college, if you're going to play inside linebacker, run fits are your first, second, and third priority, and that is the guy's biggest issue. As you said, I think maybe both of you guys said, he's not even the best linebacker on this team, but as of right now, he's considered one of the 12 best linebackers in the country. I don't get it.
Do you think it was because he's on the preseason watch list? I don't think he's on this semifinal list if he's not on the preseason watch list.
Those lists get paired off really quickly. There's got to be some analytical data that is backing up Maris Liufau at this point, and it's like Maris Liufau is another one of those great guys.
I
And
just think it's how he plays in coverage.
2/3 of his game is pretty good, but the run fits, man. It's just like there are times when it's like, what are you doing out there? You know?
I think with the scheme that Al Golden wants to play and having the versatility to be in coverage and then also mix into QB spies, 4 or 5 man stunts, Maris Leofau is really, really good at that type of stuff. And you kind of just overlook some of the run fits because of it. And like Maris is like a 50-50 on run. And if that's a third of the game, you know, I would say that like, like Maris is good 75% of the time. And the 25% is just really crushing because it's always a big run fit that he's not making.
Yeah. Excuse me. I concur. All right, Jess, read us this next question.
Sean, if we have this elite defense, and especially at the corner position, why are they not helping teach the receivers to get better separation? I guess same could be said for improving pass pro.
I don't know how much, as they say, good on good is going on in practice right now. And I know that they've talked about there are times when they pair up the ones versus the ones, especially when they're going to go up against one of the better teams. They're going to put the ones versus the ones, you know, to try to kind of push these guys a little bit. Once you get into the season, the majority of the work is going to be ones versus scout team and that kind of stuff. It's not even ones versus twos quite as much. You're doing scout team work because you're trying to go up against what the opponent is doing. Most of what Jeffrey is talking about is taking place like during training camp and spring practice and that kind of thing. Wouldn't you say, Jess?
Yeah, I would say that as well. Once you get into in season, to be honest with you, a lot of one-on-one doesn't necessarily happen. It's mainly one offense versus two defense and one defense versus two offense. And realistically, you just do that because the offense is specifically, you know, kind of game planning for the defense that they're going against. And then obviously the number one defense is game planning for the offense. Those things might not look 100% the same. And so you're just you're finding ways for, you know, per the game plan that week to go against what you're expecting to see ultimately. So yeah, you don't, as much as you would think, you don't see a lot of one versus ones, maybe in like competition periods, but those don't go very long, right? Like those aren't like long, like your team periods or anything like that.
Yep. All right. Salty's got a question for us.
Given the experience of Freeman and Parker at their current position, should Notre Dame consider hiring a recently retired head coach, for example, Bob Stoops, as an analyst? This is actually really funny because I thought of this, not this same question, but a very similar concept of, does like Notre Dame need an assistant offensive coordinator or an assistant, you know what I mean? Like a co-offensive coordinator or anything like that.
Yeah, I think that it would make sense to do something like this. It would have made sense to do it. The question is, who's available? You know, like it's one thing to say, well, just bring in, you know, hire Bob Stoops. Well, he was working in TV last year.
Yeah, who's just going to drop everything and come be a analyst in South Bend, Indiana?
Yeah, exactly. If you're a former head coach, I don't think you're rushing to go be, you know, some inexperienced offensive coordinator's analyst, whether it's at Notre Dame or wherever it is. Because if you're taking that kind of position, odds are you have eyes on wanting to be either a head coach or a coordinator yourself. So I think that there are definitely coaches with coordinator experience who you could probably go get. I mean, Chip Long is still working as an analyst, and there are others who are working as an analyst. But typically what happens is, like, if you're in those analyst positions, it's because and there's a list of different reasons why, but it's because you're not getting either interviews or you're not getting the opportunity to be at least a coordinator yourself. So I think that it's easier said than done to say, go out and hire an experienced guy to be an analyst. to sort of back up your inexperienced coordinator. I think it's a lot easier said than done.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, if they went out and got someone, the expectation would be Bob Stoops, and that just wouldn't happen. And then it would become, I feel like everyone would just have something else to complain about. It wouldn't be, again, living up to kind of the standards of what people would want, that big name.
Well, yeah, and then the other thing, because like Jeff Z says, we need to hire more experienced analysts. And again, what Notre Dame is paying their analysts compared to what maybe Alabama and Georgia and some of these other places are paying their analysts. I think that probably becomes a factor as well, like exactly how much they're going to pony up to pay some of these guys, because it's one thing to get an analyst who's sort of in a groundling, starting, working his way up type position, who's doing your typical analyst work. And it's another thing to get one with that kind of experience. Really interesting one here from We Are ND for Life. What do you think the biggest portal need is this offseason?
You flipped the table. You read the question to me.
I'm not of the opinion that quarterback is the biggest portal need myself.
No, I think that you need.
I'd like to see them probably address wide receiver, even though they do have more young talent coming in. They also remember, and this is something that I think came up a couple of mailbags ago with Caleb Smith, the guy from Virginia Tech. They gave it a shot. They went to the portal. They brought in a guy who had a lot of Division I experience at Virginia Tech, and he was not able to keep himself on the spring depth chart ahead of those young receivers who are out there. So it didn't work out. But to me, wide receiver would make a lot of sense, I think.
I'd go wide receiver, an interior defensive lineman, and probably another piece in the secondary to be safe. Like another guy like, Thomas Harper or Antonio Carter or, just another experienced defensive back to play in some nickel dime type situations. I don't think it'd be a starter. I think it'd just be a depth piece in some of those packages. And again, another interior defensive lineman, and I agreed with you on wide receiver.
Yeah. Want a couple basketball questions in here? Stymie. I cut you. I jumped you last time, so I'll let you go ahead and read the question.
I think this one was more of a comment. The basketball talk last night for an hour was like therapy. Not sure I'm ready to revisit this football fiasco again.
Yeah, Vince and Tom Noy with some basketball talk yesterday. I haven't had a chance to listen to that yet, but men played Monday night. Things worked out well for them. I didn't even mention signing day today for the men, and they. I thought that there was a basket, like a men's. Maybe is it in here someplace? Yeah, there is. Actually, there is right here from Irish Gordian Nut. How are we feeling about the future of Notre Dame men's basketball? I will say future, I feel really great. And I was thinking about this. The fact that they fell behind Niagara and then came back to beat Niagara. Just think if that had been a Mike. Think if Mike Bray were still here and that game played out the way that it played out in the end. You would not be feeling good about Niagara. You'd be going, same old Notre Dame men's basketball team. Had to come back to beat Niagara. But, Micah Shrewsbury, year one, after the way he had to go out.
New roster.
Yeah, and put together a roster.
First time actually playing together, right, in a legit game.
Yeah. So I'll say the future I feel really good about. They signed a top 20 class today. Sir Mohammed, Nazi Mohammed's former NBA, his son, part of this class, 42nd ranked player in the class. Cole Serta, Garrett Sundra, a nice class after they had a top 30 class last year. They've got a top 20 class this year, ranked number 5 in the ACC. So I'm feeling really good about the future. I think that this season is probably still, there are going to be some bumps in the road along the way. They're going to probably lose a handful of games that you just go, man, how did they lose that game? But you're going to have to remember,
He's got to
they're
get through
still
'em.
really young. And he's still kind of laying his groundwork this year. He has said that up front, minus we're going to lose some games that you don't expect us to lose. But I mean, he has said there are going to be some bumps in the road along the way. So I feel really good about the future. I think that there is a really bright future for Micah Shrewsbury in this men's basketball program. And there's going to be some bright spots this year, but there's probably going to be some low spots as well.
Nice deep valleys.
Correct.
I would say my future about Notre Dame men's basketball is exciting, because I think there's two things that are really exciting to me, and I'll start with the head coach, Micah Shrewsbury. The thing that's most exciting is you have a guy who's young and that hunger to be good at Notre Dame. Mike Brey was here for how many seasons again? Remind me, like at least 20 something, right? Like he was here
22 or 23. Because let me see. He was hired in the summer of 2020, and he coached through the end of the 22-23 season. So
yeah. 22, 23 years. What I'm getting at, though, is Mike Brey wasn't as excited in year one as he was in year 22, 23 to be the head coach of Notre Dame. You have a younger guy coming in, a guy who is, has been a fan of Notre Dame in the past, right? And so he has that excitement or that commitment or that hunger to be good, and he knows he's coming in, into a program that is where expectations need to rise as well. So I think he has that determination and hunger to be good, and I think that's a really good quality to have in a head coach, because I think, again, he's just going to work a little bit harder than what Mike Brey probably did the last 5 to 6 years of his coaching. And that's nothing against Mike Brey. That's just naturally, I think, how it goes. And then the next exciting part is just how the roster is going to be constructed. It's going to be a completely different vibe and feel from Mike Brey rosters. And I think that's exciting because you're going to see more athletic players. You're going to see more dynamic players. You're going to see a more dynamic offense. And I think it's going to be a more exciting brand of basketball. And so that's what has me feeling really good about the future of Notre Dame men's basketball.
I concur, and I have one question for you, Jesse.
Yes.
Are you ready for rapid fire?
I've been ready for rapid fire the last week, but you've been in Paris, so.
So are you saying that Vince's rapid fire was no bueno? It was like no fire?
It wasn't as rapid as your fire.
I've got to say this. If Vince happens to be listening at some point, okay? Because again, I was listening to the Monday show. The Monday show came 2 days after the Clemson game. And I'm listening to Vince. Vince, how the hell do you get up Monday morning and not know what you're going to talk about? 2 days after the Clemson game. Tell me that, Vince. How do you not know? How do you struggle to find topics Monday morning, 2 days after Notre Dame loses to Clemson?
Very controversial loss.
Come on, man. All right, that's off my chest. Jesse, question to you. We've asked like different forms of this question in different ways. Sam Hartman has 18 touchdown passes right now. I'm not going to go over under. I'm just going to ask you straight up, predict what will his touchdown total be for the season after the Stanford game?
You said he's got 18 right now, I believe.
18 right now. He's had 18 for 3 weeks at this point.
I think his final number is 23 at the end of the regular season. I think he gets 3 against one of them and 2 against the other. Just don't know who that 3 and 2 is against.
Stymie and John, we're all on the same wavelength.
Going 2 a game.
Michael Hahn, 22. I'm going 22 as well. He has 0 touchdowns and 4 interceptions over the last 2 games. And you go back the last 5, 4 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. It's like, where have the touchdowns gone? He had 14 touchdown passes and no interceptions in the first 5 games. The first 5 games, by the way, include what?
Navy,
Ohio State is the
Central.
answer. It includes Ohio State.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you didn't have to rattle off like every game that they played over the first 5. I'm just saying, yes, thank you, Michael. Michael knew what I was pointing at. It included the Ohio State game. 14 touchdown passes, no interceptions through those first 5, including Ohio State, and it's 4-7 over the last 5. It is nuts to me.
I thought I was going to cruise to my bets, and I think I'm going to lose all of them. So
I know. Remember, the Vegas over-under was 26.5 at the start of the season, and we thought that was just insanely low. And look at where
it should be
is
insanely
right
slow.
It should be.
We won't get into that conversation again.
Yep. I'm going to go with 22, and I think that he's going to have some kind of revival against his old team here next week. I guess a week from Saturday. At Stanford, well, I'll tell you what. Save that because we're gonna talk about those 2 games here in just a second. But 22 is my number. I think he's going to have 22 at the end of the regular season. Still stuck on 18 right now. Jesse, what do you think about this comment from Marcus Freeman from after the Clemson game? Quote, "The pick 6 kind of spooks you. It spooks you. It spooks the quarterback a little bit. Makes you say, okay, let's go back to the run game a little bit." What do you think of that?
I think of like 3-4 different things when I heard that comment. I'll start with the first one. I think it was one of the first because he talks about the pick 6 and the muff punt. I think it was the first time I really saw Marcus Freeman kind of not make an excuse, but kind of right. Like it was. It has never been. It's always been the execution thing, and it's never been the excuse of things. And so when he said that, I was a little taken aback. And then the next part that really caught me off guard is throwing that pick 6 came at some point.
We just lost Jesse there. Are you back? Okay, you're back. Well, nope, he is not. I thought he was back, and now he is gone. Jesse started chopping, and then my little wheel started spinning. So hopefully we're all still here together. Are you with me, Jess? You started chopping there in the middle. So maybe just start your thought from the beginning. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that the first thing that it shows is that Marcus Freeman kind of made excuses or deflections for the first time that I've really seen. I think it shows a lack of confidence in your 6-year quarterback, which is very alarming. And if it spooks you into running the ball, that pick 6 came, midway second quarter, I think at the latest or the earliest, I can't remember. And so, but you didn't run the ball very much after that. And so how do you make that sort of statement and say it spooks you? You might think about running the ball, but then you don't do anything to run the ball after you already ran the ball pretty successfully to start the game. And so there was a lot of contradictory in there as well for me.
I find it baffling that we're, again, like this was game 10 of the season. And the fact that is something that was said after game 10 with a quarterback who's the most experienced quarterback most experienced quarterback in the country coming into this season with all that this guy had under his belt and just what he looks like right now. And like the fact that you can make that statement and say, well, it spooks you. Like, look, Peyton Manning threw pick 6s. Tom Brady has thrown pick 6s.
I was listening to the Manning cast on Monday night. Peyton Manning threw 28 interceptions in his first year in the NFL.
Yeah, like it happens. And you've just got to say, look, you're our guy. We're going back to it. I don't care what just happened. Like, to say that would spook you into to altering your game plan like that just, it baffles me because this is not Drew Pine we're talking about. And to me, they handled it with kid gloves. If that's really, kind of, if it really spooked him that much, they handled it and tried to protect him, like more like he was Drew Pine than he was Sam Hartman. And unfortunately, when you, again, like, go back to what we were talking about with the offense earlier. When you look at this offense, unfortunately, you can't tell much difference, and the numbers are actually far worse under Sam Hartman right now than they were a year ago with Drew Pine at the helm. Those 4 touchdowns and 7 interceptions over the last 5 games. Drew Pine didn't have a 5-game stretch like that last year. So it's baffling to me that that's the mindset that you would have. And again, I like to say, well, you think about running it a little bit. Well, that's not what you showed in the second half because Audric Estime only toted that thing 3 times in the second half.
So what about this? I just kind of maybe thought about it in new perspective. Do you think that Marcus Freeman led with that, knowing that Sam Hartman didn't have his best game in the second half and that the pick 6 is what led him to maybe some of those spooky throws or those, because he had some off throws in the second half. And so was that him getting out of it early and saying, hey, before you get into Sam Hartman's play in the second half, just know that interception in the first half spooked him. And so that's probably what led to his inaccurate throws in the second half. I'm just thinking a different perspective. But now that I think about it more, I think that's another possibility of why he led with that.
Yeah. This is a great comment by John B. He says he shouldn't get spooked with his experience. It's an occupational hazard as a quarterback. Marcus Freeman always banging about one play, one life, etc. Practice what you preach. And that's
next play. Why are we worrying about an interception that's spooking us?
And Josh says, wonder if he, meant deflating. Well, I think to an extent that it was deflating, but at the same time, it's that tail end of the comment that Marcus Freeman said. It's like, to me, it was less about being deflating and more just about, oh my gosh, he just threw a pick 6. Now we've got to protect him. And, we can't take chances. We're on the road and we're in this game. And, so again, it does not sound like and it wasn't a statement of confidence in the quarterback in the way
that's the biggest takeaway.
Yeah. Unfortunately. Fill in the blank. You feel blank about Notre Dame's next 2 games against Wake Forest and Stanford.
I feel not really excited about Notre Dame's next 2 games against Wake Forest and Stanford because they blew opportunities to be in the playoffs. They blew opportunities to be the New Year's Six. And now with all of this just disaster of offensive cocktail that's happening, I just kind of want it to be done with. I don't want to see this offense struggle anymore. I don't want to see, I don't want potentially Notre Dame to lose another game because I think that brings up questions about Marcus Freeman. And I don't think that I don't think it's time for any of that yet. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's, if Marcus Freeman loses another game, sure, I don't think he really got better, but I don't think that's a fireable offense. And after 2 seasons, and I think that'll lead to a lot of, those sort of discussions. And so I'm really sad about, what has now transpired and what these last 2 games kind of mean to everyone, but it's just not as meaningful, obviously, after the loss to Clemson. And I think really there's no winning at this point. Even if you win these games, there's going to be something that people are going to be upset about.
I'm much more uneasy about them than I ever would have thought that I would be.
I would just hope that they would be more experimental at this phase. What do you have to lose ultimately? You
want them to be experimental?
Just break out of some tendencies on offense. Be more experimental on offense.
Oh, that I agree with.
Trying new things, trying new looks out of maybe some formations that you've showed. You have 2 weeks, another bye week. You have 2 weeks to just take in some of this feedback and really try to get I'm not saying go crazy, but just show that you tried. Show that you're listening to what people are saying.
John says he's very confident, and there's no way Notre Dame loses to Wake Forest or Stanford. I agree with what Tim, did I put that comment up there from Tim? Stanford just scares the heck out of me right now. Like, I think that Wake Forest, because it's a home game and they might not start fast. I don't know. I think Notre Dame's defense will just own Wake Forest. The question is going to be the offense, and you are talking about a really smart coaching staff at Wake Forest who does know Sam Hartman and his own tendencies very well, coupled with the fact that you have some other troubling, tendencies and stuff like that he has shown this season. So I don't know. like I said, I'm a lot more uneasy about it. And the Stanford game, I've really been scared of Stanford really since that comeback against Colorado. And now, granted, Notre Dame's, as much as Notre Dame's offensive line has struggled at times, their offensive line is still far better than Colorado's, and their defense is in a completely different league than Colorado's. But still, the fact that Stanford could come back and win that game at Colorado, and then look at their last couple of games. They scored points on Washington. They scored 33 points on Washington, and that was a home game. And then they played a defensive game and beat Washington State 10-7 last week. So that, coupled with what happened last year at Notre Dame Stadium against Stanford, that game scares the heck out of me right now. The fact that the way Notre Dame has played on the road these last few games, yes, they've been against better teams than Stanford, but it's scary going on the road to close the season in a game that's probably not going to be very well attended. What the atmosphere is going to be like there is going to be really weird. I don't know. I have no idea what to expect in that game. So I'm very uneasy about both these games. Brian threw this question in earlier. Thoughts on Penn State playing Michigan at noon instead of a night game in Happy Valley? Remember, the Big Ten doesn't like these night games in November. They're complaining about it with the NBC contract and all this stuff. And of course, they've got the contract with Fox. So it's a big noon kickoff, and all their premier games involving Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State are noon kickoffs. So I don't have a problem with it, and I'll at least get to watch some of it before I fly to New Jersey this weekend.
I wish that the Big Ten would put its premier games in the evening time. I just think it makes it more exciting, more watchable. But I understand why they do it at noon. They like you said, they like to put their premier games there. It's what they believe is going to get the best ratings because it has its undivided, the nation's undivided, attention. And so it just makes logistical sense for the Big Ten, and it's not ever really.
I paid for a mute button for you. Paid for a mute button.
I couldn't get it quite in time. As I was turning, I couldn't see the mute button, so I just kind of, I just had to let it go.
Bill asks about playing the two young quarterbacks, and this is still. Let me ask you this: should we just? I know you guys did a little bit about it the other day. You ended up talking about a lot of other stuff before. Should we just dedicate a whole show to tomorrow to sort of this theme? What should happen with the quarterbacks? You want to do that?
Yeah, I think you can do what should happen to end the season and what should happen going forward. I think you could lump it all into what does Notre Dame do at quarterback starting now?
Yes. So good question, Bill. It's something that obviously I haven't got a chance to talk about yet. So rather than kind of pin it here as one of multiple topics at the end of rapid fire, I think we'll get into that big picture, not just with the quarterback, but how they should approach the overall against Wake Forest and Stanford at some different positions in terms of how they need to play this the next couple games. You want to just do that tomorrow?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Okay.
It is the bye week.
That's exactly right. Okay, so Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, and Florida State are the top 4 teams in the second college football playoff rankings that just came out. Scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you those 4 teams will be the playoff teams when it's all said and done?
10 being extremely confident, 1 being non-confident at all. I would give this a solid 3 out of 10. I think that Ohio State will be in the Final Four. I think Florida State will be in the Final Four. I don't think Michigan will be in the Final Four, and I don't think Georgia will be in the Final Four. I think you'll get Washington in there potentially, and then if Georgia loses, it'll probably be at the hands of Alabama, and so I think Alabama sneaks in as your SEC team. So from the SEC, I think it goes Bama, Big Ten, Ohio State, Pac-12, Washington, ACC, Florida State. That's my Final Four.
It is crazy how everyone just wrote off Alabama after that loss to Texas with all the stuff they were going through at quarterback. And I mean, let's face it, the quarterback situation looked pretty abysmal. But here they are lurking.
Figured it out.
That's right. And they are sitting there at number 8 right now. And I agree with you. I think that Alabama is probably going to find themselves right back in
One-loss
there.
ACC, SEC championship, and the committee loves that.
They're going to work their way in. Florida State and what that looks like. Can Florida State, they're going to run the table, I think, in the regular season. That Florida game lurking here. They got Florida and Miami here coming up. And I think they're better than both teams, but they are rivalry games, 2 out of their last 3. And then they're probably going to get Louisville in the ACC championship game. So
I don't think the ACC championship will have any weight on whether or not they get in or out. I think that's just an extra game for them. I don't think it'll be
really.
Them.
You think they can lose that and still make it in?
Yeah, I do.
I'm with you though. I'm like a 4. I don't think that it's probably going to be them. I think Alabama, as you said, is working their way back in there, and I really like Washington as well. I think that Washington is going to get back in there as well. I think it's going to be different though. I think Michigan's going to beat Ohio State. You seem to think maybe you've lived in Ohio too long. You seem to be on the Buckeye train, that the Buckeyes are going to beat Michigan. Is that what you're saying?
I am. I do think that Ohio State wins this.
But the question there is, they're probably going to play in back-to-back weeks, which we talked about at the beginning of the season. Can whoever wins the regular season game win 2 weeks in a row, Big Ten championship game? That'll be kind of the X factor there. And if they split, what does that mean? Do they both still get in? Fill in the blank. It's blank that Notre Dame freshman point guards Marcus Burton and Hannah Hidalgo both scored the most points ever for an Irish freshman in their debut games Monday.
It's electric for both programs. It's electric for both the future of both basketball programs. I was trying to find the best way to put that in there. And I think, it's more so exciting for the men's because of just you didn't know what the roster was going to look like. You didn't know who the guy was going to be. But if you had to pick what would be best, I would say it'd be best for a freshman, right? Because that means they have the longest potential amount of time of probably being at Notre Dame. And so I think that only leads to more kind of growth going forward. I'm not as excited about the Hidalgo. It's exciting, but I'm not as excited because Notre Dame the women have probably the best combination of guards in the country when everyone's healthy. And so I don't think Hidalgo's performance is reflective to what you'll see the entire season. I think with Citron still being out, those numbers are a bit inflated. I don't think she'll see as much usage with Sonia Citron coming back. So while it was exciting, I just think that, again, when you have
Olivia
that
Miles
three-header
coming back.
Sorry, that's what I meant. Olivia Miles. Thank you. Again, I get them all confused. It's like the 3-headed monster at guard right now for them. But yeah, when Olivia Miles comes back, I think that there will be, again, a different usage between those 3. All 3 of them will play, but Hidalgo is going to see a reduction once Olivia Miles is back.
There's an interesting question here that I'll get to in just a second about KK Bransford that someone asked earlier. I think when I look at this, it kind of reminds me of it's been 20 plus years at this point when Chris Thomas and Jackie Batiste were both freshmen the same year. Chris Thomas walked in and, had a triple double in his first career game for Notre Dame. And both of them, Batiste and Thomas, I believe they were both Big East Rookies of the Year the same year, and they were both freshman All-American that same year as well. There's like a little bit of that. I mean, you're right. Like from the women's standpoint, there's always going to be, it's, like Hidalgo walks into a situation where obviously there's a base set and there's a lot around her as well. But to walk in the door and have that kind of game, even though you lose it ended up being an uglier game than anyone wanted to see, especially in the second half. But to do it against that level of competition right away, I think really speaks well for her. But at the same time, like you were saying, for Marcus Burton and for Micah Shrewsbury, I think it is just a great sign of things to come because, like, Marcus Burton was a little bit, I don't want to say overlooked, but he was the only guy who committed to Mike Bray and who stayed on and is still at Notre Dame. And here he is. He comes in the door and he has that kind of performance right out of the gate. So I just think it's great for Micah Shrewsbury. I think it's great for Marcus Burton and the entire program. And I think Stymie or somebody was saying earlier just about the way that team plays. And I think that is going to play for the long haul as well. The way they play hard for 40 minutes, they're interested in playing defense. And I think that that's going to be a big difference that like basketball fans have been missing watching this program over the years, that there's more than just the offensive side of the floor. Defense matters as well. Keith was asking, do the women miss KK Bransford? She had a knack for making important, timely shots. And not just, I think it's less the offense. There's a lot of glue with KK Bransford that I think that they're missing. Both the athleticism, the speed, just the flow of the offense, those kind of things, the defense, really good defensive player. So, yeah, to answer your question, I do think they miss KK Bransford, even though they have a lot of other bodies out there right now. She was very important down the stretch last year after Olivia Miles was injured, and I do think that they miss her, and they'll be glad to get her back here, hopefully within the next week or two. She's had like some lower leg kind of stuff going on. She wasn't in uniform for the opener the other night or for the exhibition game before that as well. Oh, Tom is mad about the basketball talk and probably mad about the women's basketball talk. Sorry, we're talking about ranked teams
in Paris.
Sorry, we're talking about things other than football.
Would you say this was my biggest observation with the women's game? Just I know that obviously you were there and you see it all, and I just see, I saw mainly box score and that kind of stuff. But to me, it felt like Notre Dame played a tremendous first, got really behind in the second. I think it was like an 18-point swing in the second. Like Notre Dame scored only like 8, and I think they were like 24-8, I think is what it was. I just felt like at that point, the final score was the final score, obviously, but I felt like that they dug that hole really early in the second, and there was just no way of kind of coming out of it once the game kind of progressed, I guess what I'm saying is I don't think that they played bad except for one quarter, and it just really proved to be detrimental.
Yeah. South Carolina swung it in the second because like the first quarter, it's looking like, okay, Notre Dame is playing, not just playing with them. Like this could be a really good game from start to finish, but unfortunately that only lasted for 10 minutes. Just between the fact that Carmilla Cardozo, South Carolina's big, she was the SEC sixth woman of the year last year. She blocked 70 shots last year coming off the bench. Oof. 70 shots she blocked coming off the bench behind Aaliyah Boston, who ended up being the number 1 overall pick in the WNBA draft. She was only 3 blocks behind her, and she had like 20 points. I think it was 14 or 15 rebounds, and she blocked 4 shots, even though it seemed like she blocked twice as many. Just between her presence in the pace and all the athleticism, like South Carolina came into this season feeling like this was probably the best group of guards that Don Staley has ever had. And that's obviously saying something when you're talking about a program that's won a pair of national championships in the last 6 years. So I think that their athleticism was just off the charts. And for whatever reason, again, like how much a player like KK Bransford played into this, how much maybe having a point guard who, like 31 points is 31 points, and that's great, but it didn't feel like there was a lot of sync, across the offense in that game for Notre Dame. And you're right. They obviously just couldn't dig out of the hole after that. Now, they've got some games coming up where they're going to be able to figure some things out that are going to be a lot easier to figure out than when you're playing against a program like South Carolina. Really, it's going to build up to You're going to play a couple ranked teams. They're going to play Illinois here in a couple of weeks in Washington, D.C. in that Shamrock Classic, and they're going to play Tennessee at the end of the month down in Knoxville. So those are going to be kind of some litmus for where you've come after South Carolina. I see that Henry and Scooby are getting worked up about this whole
Yeah, I
basketball
just have
talk.
a buddy coming over this evening, and I think he's here. So I'm telling him to feed the dog treats, and they'll like him.
Yeah, Bryce is just joining in, and he's asking about the Parker demotion. And again, I don't know if this came from the Twitter rumor that started.
Sorry, could you say that again?
Hold on. But based on everything that we're hearing at Irish Breakdown, it's all a load of BS. There's nothing that's going to happen. There's nothing happening here, before Wake Forest or probably before the season is going to end. It's all based on, all the sources that Irish Breakdown is talking to. It's all a bunch of BS that was, started by someone who doesn't actually have sources of his own, but uses other people's information to try to make it sound like he has sources. All right, Jess, I think that's going to do it for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow, and we'll, like I said, we'll kind of get into what direction Notre Dame needs to be looking these last couple of games against Wake Forest and Stanford. And, and then the bowl game, I think, is its own separate situation. But we'll talk about whether it's quarterback or linebacker or whatever other position that it happens to be. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Glad to have you back today.
All right. Glad to be back. Glad to be with you here today. I'm glad the dogs are settled down. All right. We'll wrap it up with that, and we will talk to you tomorrow. Hit the like button and, of course, subscribe, rate, and review. We've got more Notre Dame football talk coming up on Thursday's show on IB Nation Sports Talk.